A lot of people talk about in order to improve your life, you need to sacrifice the present for the future. But I would argue not to sacrifice the moment, but to become the moment. Not to work today for tomorrow, work today for today. So I think that our conception of the future can play into so much fear, and that fear can dictate so many of our decisions. So I think that walking down this hill is going to be very difficult. There we go. I think that the idea of like hard work being something that's always difficult and a sacrifice is not necessarily correct. There are people who really enjoy working out. There's people who really hate working out. There's people who really enjoy being a chef. There's people who hate being a chef. So I guess it comes down to how you define suffering. But to me, when I'm in the middle of a really long hike or walking down a icy hill that I could fall off, it's challenging, but I'm not suffering because it's something that I enjoy. And I feel like if, you're someone who doesn't like to cook, getting a bunch of groceries to try to cook a dinner is probably a stressful situation for some people, or just something they have to spend a lot of like energy to get themselves to do, as opposed to like a chef. Like, that's the thing that they want to do with their time, like there's people who couldn't work out even if it would save their life, and as a result live a very unhealthy life. And there's people who all they want to do is work out. There's this idea, some people call it like intentional suffering, like choose your pain or choose your suffering, like, or else life will control you. Kind of like if you imagine like the yin and the yang, that black and white circle. It's like the yin and the yang is the way of life. So I don't know which one is yin and which one is yang. I don't want to guess. But let's say that if all your focus is on the yin, then you're going to overlook the yang. And if all your focus is on the yang, then you're going to overlook the yin. And I think that so much of the stuff we may be overlooking in our lives is on that other side. So someone who's like depressed is probably overlooking a lot of the good things about their life. And someone who is, really ambitious and optimistic, like myself, can overlook their flaws and their errors and, the realities of myself that I have less control over than I'd like to admit. I hate cleaning, but I think that the ability to give yourself a purpose, a why, allows you to access more and more energy and motivation to do these things you might not necessarily like, So let's say someone doesn't really like to cook for themselves, and they don't really necessarily like being a chef, but on Valentine's Day or something, they want to impress their girlfriend. Then they're going to go way more all out. They're going to put in way more effort, not necessarily because they love cooking, but because they love their girlfriend. And that love you have for one thing can be the kind of motivating force that allows you to do many things with a better mental framework of motivations and incentives. Incentive structure is something that's so important. I think whenever a situation has misidentified its incentive structure, or basically what that means, incentive is like reason to do something. So like if I give someone money, that's an incentive. Maybe if I give someone, it's crazy how money's like such a primary incentive for everything that we do. But if I am capable of dropping like coherent value on these hikes and I don't get too caught up in my head, then that is an incentive to watch these videos. And the misapplication of incentive structure not only puts people at odds with the desired goal, it puts humans at odds with reality. Meaning that the incentive structure of... Let me think of a good kind of example of an incentive structure here. The bonuses you get at work. So it's like, let's say your job is to make one gingerbread house. Let's say you're employed by the North Pole and you got to make a gingerbread house. If you have 30 days to do it, it'll probably, for most people, get finished on day 29 or 30, and, maybe someone who procrastinates will start the project on day 27. Maybe someone who's like super hardworking will spend that 20 days practicing and learning and doing better. But if it's not like rewarded for someone to make the best gingerbread house, and all you need to do is make a gingerbread house, then even if the person is really excited about their gingerbread house, we get upset if you see other people doing less work than you getting the same amount of money or same amount of reward, So that means that we are naturally going to do the amount of work that is the bare minimum, basically, unless there is an incentive to do better. So it could be whoever has the best gingerbread house gets to come with Santa Claus to Disney World. Whoever has the worst gingerbread house gets fired, gets exiled. The ability for the incentive to define the work is something that can very often be overlooked. It's like, oh, I'm paying an employee, they need to give me their absolute best all the time. But it's actually in both parties' best interest to provide an incentive for them to do so. And in doing so, it gives them more motivation, more reason, more understanding of why to go above and beyond in their work. It's the root cause of why so many businesses are unable to get the most out of their employees, get the most out of their workflow. Because the idea that we as individuals are always going to be on that yin, or always going to be on the positive side of the yin yang and never on the negative side, is wrong. So when we do encounter that negative side, it's important to have an incentive of the positive side. And I like how I use the example of like fired. is an incentive, because the incentive isn't just positive things, it can also be negative things. So that explains a lot more like base human behavior. Like the core incentive is survival. But yeah, the idea that these things are just implied or inherent, meaning naturally humans are just going to do that, like I said, it's not a good mental framework, because let's say that person who is going above and beyond on the gingerbread house gets paid the same as a really sloppy, ugly gingerbread house. Then that person who's making the really good gingerbread house, I should have used a better analogy. I feel like it would be good if I, had like a whole animation visual, but I just feel like that's not worth it. We're gonna pivot. We don't need to double down on bad things. Let's say the person who builds a really good house gets paid the exact same as someone who builds a really bad house. Well, then now you are reaffirming that their actions do not have an impact on reality. You're making a mental framework which doesn't allow someone to experience the cause and effect of their work directly, because the misapplication of incentive structure basically consumes that effect and it levels it out across a multitude of people, which is why you have that Pareto principle idea of, in any situation, it trends towards 20% of people, or the top 20%, doing 80% of the workload. And that is obviously imbalanced, and I think that's why we're starting to see a lot more companies get a lot leaner. That Pareto principle suggests that there are people in different situations who are able to provide significant value, value that exceeds the work of multiple other people. But if you aren't giving those people the allowance or opportunity to have a proper mental framework in doing so, then I believe both parties are setting themselves up to fail. Like, this idea of an incoherent mental framework, I think, is really important. I think a lot of like depression, a lot of like mental health is the result of compounding non-coherent mental frameworks. So compounding meaning like the more that you build off of something that's broken, the more of the issues are going to emerge. So if you almost slipped. If you build a house that has a really bad frame, meaning like the wooden skeleton of it, then that skeleton is going to affect all of the things on top of it. It's going to affect the floor over time. It'll start to bend and warp, which will then affect the baseboard where the floor connects to the wall. That will start to basically come uneven. From there, that will affect the actual drywall, and basically the one original issue that was built on top of becomes the root cause of all of the issues on the things built on it. So a lot of times we diagnose the thing that we can see, but we don't get to the root cause of the problem. And I think an example of how we are so involved and ingrained in these incoherent frameworks is, let's say like a young person wants to... So like when I was in school, I remember I wanted to write a paper on like 9/11, and the teacher was like, no, we're not allowed to, we're like not doing any like conspiracies or anything. that's like nonsense. But then a lot of the stuff I would have said many years later becomes a very prevalent talking point. So I didn't learn that what I was doing is disinteresting and you shouldn't question authority like they were trying to ingrain. What I learned is that the interest that I have and the way that they're valued does not correlate to how I perform. And the way that I perform does not correlate to the actual truth of the matter, the truth of the value, you could say. It comes down to the discretion of the teacher. So your teacher as a child, I feel like your teachers are so critical, so important. And I guess I turned out all right. So credit to all of my good teachers who are like, before I roast teachers, sidebar story of when I was in summer school, there was like a teacher I had, and this class was just real bad kids. Like, it was just all of the worst kids in the county put together. And they were so mean to her. And like, I've always had a little bit of swagger. I've always had, my aura, my aura on point. So like, I would kind of check these kids, and they just want to be cool, and I'm cool. So like, when I would check them, they'd kind of be like, oh man, maybe this isn't cool. And it's like the way that teachers have to absorb and deal with, like, kids, teenagers who are just can be very combative, and then they have to deal with them in a system that these teachers don't exactly love. It's not like they get paid well. It's not like they have the proper framework or incentive structure. And I remember, like, at the end of the class, I wrote my paper on, like, we were supposed to, like, I think write a story. And I basically wrote, like, a story kind of glorifying and empathizing with this teacher and, like, how important she was to these young kids, because she might not receive the benefit right now, but many years later, someone like me, and maybe someone like these kids I talk to, will look back on it and be thankful. And regardless of even if they consciously remember it, subconsciously, a young mind really takes impact on what's in front of it. So the role of teacher is very important, and that's something we absolutely need to recognize the value in. And just raising youth in general, I feel like motherhood and teaching and daycare and childcare is more important than anything happening at SpaceX or anything happening in Silicon Valley. It's like, a Tesla robot's potential versus a child's potential. I would invest in the child, especially at scale. But now, kind of the roast of teachers is, there's so many instances where the kid is right and the teacher's wrong, and the teacher even sometimes knows they're wrong and gets defensive and gets upset, or can't even recognize in the ways that which they're outdated or antiquated or incorrect, which leads to that corrupted kind of mental framework I was speaking to. Like, a child who... Another thing I used to do, this is a true story. I remember it was either second or third grade, there was a Wix portal, a web builder that was really easy to use. And it was like very template based, so it's not a lot of creative work going on. But I made websites in like second grade. And I remember when we would go to the computer lab and learn how to type, I would teach other kids how to make their own website. And the teachers would like treat it as if we were doing something we weren't supposed to do, as if like there was something bad. And this is like I wouldn't distract people from their work. We'd finish our work, and there's, in any 30-person classroom, there's a variable amount of time people take to complete work. So I would finish my work real quick and then make websites with other kids, doing something that my teachers, I would be willing to bet, probably like didn't know anything about. And that's a great example of like the point of why we're in there is to gain computer literacy, aka learn how to type. And I'm teaching kids as a kid something that would have exponentially raised their computer literacy. Even just having a basic understanding of domains, embedding, coding, templates, and web store at that age. You know, like I remember I ordered business cards for myself on Vistaprint with like my birthday money. And like Vistaprint is still around. And like it's Vistaprint is a company where you can order stuff like business cards and marketing materials. And, you know, I ended up using that same service at my job to produce marketing materials like business cards. And in the meeting I had to propose those business cards, there was a very kind woman who probably had a son about my age. And she said, "Oh, the business cards they were previously white, and I switched it to a slight shade of off-white because rich white, although it became very popular at the turn of the digital age and modern age, with stuff like print materials and stuff that was easier to get damaged, white was getting transitioned away from because it would be the easiest thing to notice dirt on. Like you see the same thing with clothes. Like a lot of people don't want to buy white t-shirts because if you get even like the slightest stain on it, then you can see a lot of the dirt on it. And she basically said that this is completely outdated, this looks like the 60s, etc., etc. And then I had to go around for the next 2 years and see Balenciaga and Prada and every freaking company on earth start shifting from white to a subtle off-white to one, age better, to the subtleties of off-white. You can go more of a cool white, you can go more of a warm white, you can go, you know, with a subtle pink, like a subtle green, and these things play into color psychology and overall branding in a favorable way. But basically, her understanding in that moment was on the basis of where things were. And my understanding at that moment was based on where things were going. And the framework of just the mental framework there that I had to deal with was I wasn't responding to the truth of how this thing would perform in the market. I was responding to somebody else's previous opinion of how this thing would form in the market. She was a very sweet lady, you know, but the ways in which young people and people in general are stifled by the limit of other people's knowledge and understanding is exemplified in something like school and grades, the grading system. Like this idea of just arbitrarily making people fall in line to the capacity of the teacher's understanding rather than have promotion of young people being the future and inherently, naturally surpassing the modern day understandings, being the most equipped to explore them due to the neuroplasticity, their brain's ability to adjust. That'd be really good. Like, I had a teacher in civics class, Schlobach, shout out him. He was like the best person equipped to deal with me, because I remember I would like finish all of my work within the first 10, 15 minutes of class. And then I would just go on my phone. And all the other teachers would like freak out and be like, no, 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 no. So then naturally, I would just like talk to other students. And then it's like, no, you can't be distracting other people while they're doing their work. And it's like, okay, so you just kind of want me to sit here and do nothing because what? You don't like phones? I don't even know what the reasoning there is. Like, to enforce someone that already completed it. Like, if I already completed the task, why do I have to still act as if I'm doing the task? Like, the incentive structure doesn't make sense. You should be happy that I finished the worksheet. I feel like I didn't communicate that the best. Another example of how Schlobach helped me out is, this is the problem with this live form, is like, I gotta be so sharp, dude, because I want to stay coherent, Schlobach would allow me basically to go on my phone after I finish these worksheets, and I found that to be a really great thing. Another example of how this dude was perfectly equipped to deal with me is, you had to do speeches. And obviously people would write down their speeches and turn in the paper alongside with doing the speech. And first time, I never did homework my entire academic career, ever. I just didn't do it. I refused to do it. I was literally outside playing. At school, they could hardly keep me in the classroom. I would just always be outside playing. But especially when I was outside of school, they had 0% chance of getting me to do work, because what was the incentive, So for that reason, I didn't do the assignment. And since it was a speech, he called me up, and I went up there and gave a speech. And he immediately, like, this was a smart guy, he recognized that I didn't have a paper in my hand. He recognized that this was definitely off the cuff, but it was good. So I got a good grade. I actually got an A. And the whole framework of the class, instead of like tests at the end of the quarters or, chapters, you would do speeches, and they would increase in length. So it was a 1 minute, then 2 minute, then 3 minute. And the final project for the class is a 5-minute speech. And not only was I able to give these speeches, but I was able to use abstract metaphors to make my points. So I remember saying, I did a paper on why 2 Chainz should be president, or not a speech, and it was really a critique of government and pointing towards how, incompetent and corrupt our politicians are. So someone like 2 Chainz probably would end up being a better president. And I remember by the final project, my 5-minute speech, I gave a speech on Schlobach and why he, as a teacher, was so beneficial to me as a student. Another example of how, I'm thinking back, I haven't even thought about these things. At this point, I'm really reminiscing. There was like a project we did where you would invest hypothetical money, but it was into the real stock market. So there was like, fake money, proxy money, and every student gets to pick where to invest it and how to invest it. And then over the course of the class, you see, how that would have performed. I remember this kid, Devin, who was super tall. He had like a size 15 shoe at like 12 years old. His 100,000 turned into like $9 million. And I've always been, I got to look into it. I'm curious if he's a filthy rich stock trader at this point. And yeah, Schlobach, even like instead of kind of doing like lessons on lessons on lessons, we would spend the end of every class doing Socratic seminars, which was basically we would all sit together in a circle and talk to each other. And within a few of them, he basically allowed me to be the moderator. And I think that was so bold and great of him to do, is allow a student to run a social circuit of students, because I'm the most socially, like most meaning between me and a teacher, between me and someone who's older, a student, any student, but especially one who I guess is more interested in talking than writing, is someone who would be very well equipped to deal with that seminar in a way that gets to the point of it. Because the point of it is for us to collectively think and work with each other to build understanding, work with each other to hear each other out and listen to each other's points. And if you're just writing a paper and the whole point of it is to make your point and, you know, have one paragraph that's a counter argument, but ultimately you get poorly graded unless you like destroy that counter argument and defeat it. Even like labeling it as counter, is a little much. But yeah, I think that those are many ways where he provided a framework of kind of mental understanding that was very good and compounded into very good things. But there's also many teachers I had that were the opposite. That's where like gambling is such a dangerous mental framework, because it has no correlation to anything you do, any of your actions, and it's the result of other people's actions. So, you know, any prediction of the future is a gamble, but you have control when you gamble on yourself. You defer control, you give it away on gambling, which, like, whether you win or lose, that's a bad mental framework. Winning might actually be worse for your brain, because it teaches you that, it just doesn't matter how much energy or effort or motivation you put behind something. If the player gets injured, or if like the kicker misses a field goal, then that's how you like win money or something, or that's how you lose money. Then like you aren't building within your brain a proper connection between effort and output. And sometimes I like get way too caught up in making like a specific particular point. And I think one of the best things about how I film these videos when I look back on them is that I'm not limited by specific points, which allows me to abstractly interrogate different ideas in a natural stream of consciousness, which allows me to value thoughts within my brain beyond my insecurity or fear about them. So yeah, an example of like how school gives kids incoherent mental framework is if a young kid writes a really good paper, but it gets a bad grade, then that tells their brain that it doesn't matter how good their paper is. What matters is how much it resonates with the teacher. So at that point, they're being rewarded to resonate with a teacher. They're not being rewarded to necessarily be good. And that isn't a super simple equation, but that's where I like the idea of, lived experience being the teacher rather than some sort of like hypothetical, like Bill has two watermelons. Bill has 20 watermelons. He goes to the supermarket, buys 4 watermelons. Nancy wants 6 watermelons. How many watermelons does Bill end up with? And it's like 18, I think, but why do we have to use all that language to deal with mathematics? Why can't we just get a bunch of watermelons? That's a big fruit. It's an unnecessarily large fruit to use in a math class. Why don't they just get like a bunch of apples and use that to teach kids math? So it's like an apple can teach you about fractions by slicing it. And we'll have worksheets where like there's pictures of cake and pizza being sliced as a way to teach fractions, but really what you're teaching is just the connection between symbols and ideas, as opposed to teaching the connection between reality and ideas. The value difference between 2 pictures of cake, one of them cut in half and one of them cut in fourths, is 2 lines on the sheet. So really 1 line is the difference, and it's a purely visual difference, and everything beyond that singular line is processed within our head. As opposed to if you have a physical cake there, the difference is beyond the physical. You want a slice of cake, and you therefore see how it's valued. And then maybe some people are allergic to that cake, and maybe some people don't want the cake. And then you start to build a better understanding of how a fraction of something good a fraction of something can have different, an equivalent fraction of something can have different values based on the equation that it's put into. And this video is slowly turning into me saying the same thing I always say. Here's a stream of consciousness of my insecurity popping into my head, and I'm gonna pop it right back out and be like, this is brilliant. Come on, I'm trying to show the water behind me. Oh, we're almost. Well, see, like, anytime I do something like that, immediately I'm like, oh no, my retention just completely crashed. Everyone clicked out of the video. And I don't want my actions to be dictated by an algorithm, because an algorithm is very much doing the same thing I'm talking about with broken incentive structures, and we're appeasing an algorithm rather than appeasing people, but the algorithm's point is to appease people. So I don't know if appease is the right word. I don't know if I'm using that correctly. We serve an algorithm. The algorithm wants to serve people, but the algorithm may overlook when people are serving people because it's not as equipped to serve people as a person. Yeah. Making my way downtown, walking fast. I might get copyright striked just for singing this song. I wanna fly. This jacket has shoulder pads. It's a good example of how shoulder pads add formality. And a lot of the formality that we assigned to a suit was actually the result of the accentuated shoulders. But I'm sure there's someone in fashion school who was like, what if we take the shoulder pads and put them in a jacket? And their teacher was like, no, you idiot. This is not how you make a jacket. This is how you make a blazer. This is how you make a suit. But then you can put it into the market and see how it performs. Because someone with a more modernist understanding would recognize the form elements of our visual perception and realize that the suit ultimately just comes down to form, you know? Visuals are basically a mixture of shapes and color. So it can take the shape and color of a suit, but make it more comfortable and cozy and warm and durable. And then someone who's older might be like, nah, but a suit is more formal. A suit is more valuable. But someone who's younger, like me, might be stupid enough to spend $600 on this Greg Ross jacket because it does a wonderful job of evolving the conclusions we've drawn within the fashion industry. And then, whoo! One time for the damn. I'm 40 minutes in. If you're this far in with me, I really appreciate your time. I hope I'm providing value. You know, we're just kind of hanging out. Hanging out down the street. The same old thing we did last week. Oh my gosh. There goes all the viewers I had left. My retention just dipped. So much of my issue with the medical industry I'm scared to talk about because I think that they might kill me. But so much of my issue with the medical industry is this same concept of previous understandings being unfairly enforced without the allowance for new and better understanding. And as that happens, we see industry built around enforcing these previous ways of understanding in order to reinforce previous ways of power, you know? So it's like the textbook companies probably have, I have no idea, I'm guessing that the textbook companies probably have more input on state curriculum than they should. And I think, the medical industry has a lust for the pharmaceutical companies. The idea that something like vitamin D or Allen Iverson Mectin, I don't even know if, like, the algorithm dictates the way I speak because I don't want things to get picked up by the AI algorithm and then point me into some box. I'm just here to talk. I just want to talk. But there's a horse medicine that was very widely given out in India, which showed extremely positive results as far as boosting the immune system, but was demonized because it is extremely inexpensive, and that would mean anyone could get it, as opposed to pharmaceutical solutions, which are patented and scientifically made, and then the industry of pharmacy has a hold over the medical industry and the ability to reinforce negative incentive structures where they no longer benefit people's health and start to benefit these powerful companies, even though the reason that they turn to these powerful companies is to benefit people's health. Booyah, 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 boom! And the reality of nutrition is suspicious when the food is extremely manipulated and extremely processed in order to maximize profit margin. That's where I love Steve Jobs' top line philosophy. So many people get caught up in the bottom line. They forget that the bottom line is the result of the top line, and the top line is the value in relation to a human. So, the root cause of a lot of this is insecurity and fear. I, as a young, brilliant child, often felt that my teachers were maybe intimidated by me, by my capacity, particularly digitally. It's like I think deep down that teacher knew when I was making custom websites, probably, that I'm not doing a bad thing. I'm just doing something that he doesn't understand. And we're very quick to fear what we don't understand. We're very quick to fear the unknown. And that fear of what was unknown to him but known to me leads to a incorrect stifling of the thing. Booyaka, 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 shaka. Booyaka, 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 shaka. And, basically, I ran out of things to say because I forgot my what was the prompt to this? Literally up until I pressed record, I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I was talking about drapetomania, which is another tie into the medical industry, because if you wanted to be free as a slave, the doctor would come by and say, oh yeah, this is a classic case of drapetomania. So you see, he's clinically insane. This pursuit of freedom is the result of a mental sickness, a deficiency in the brain. No, it was the result of being a fucking slave, idiot. So, that is an example of how science and medicine can be misused as a source of authority on the human condition. Oh yeah, this is classic. This is a case of ADHD, anxiety, and depression. No. It's a case of he's been inside for 95% of his waking existence, and he's not allowed to do anything novel because people don't understand it, so they tell him that he has to wait 20 years before he can do anything of value. I wanna fly. So, I guess a through line I'm drawing here from the initial point that I'm still trying to remember. Another thing I wanted to talk about is how positive of a framework friendship is in the right setting. We can have toxic friendships, but friendship is consensual. We have a choice. Never forget that. So the people that we're friends with is based on the value they give us And that's the great example of how value is not quantity, it's quality. We don't pick our friends based on like who's the tallest, who has the most money, who's the best looking, some people, who's blah, 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 blah. It's who can I have interesting conversations with? Who do I align with? Who, makes me feel positive and seen and heard, and who benefits my human condition? So the value we have for our friends, our close friends, is a lot. If someone's friend was dying and they could put out 50% of their bank account in order to save their life, then people would probably spend a lot of money to save their friend's life. But their friend doesn't give them any quantitative value. It doesn't boost shareholder value. It doesn't optimize revenue. It doesn't allow me to buy my 6th yacht on my 7th island that I use 10% of my money for, because the other 90% is going to go to my children who inherit a terrible world because I oppress everybody. I got to empathize with the powers that be, though. I feel for them. It's like they're the most scared, It seems we live in the American dream, but the people highest up got the lowest self-esteem. The prettiest people do the ugliest thing on the road to riches and diamond rings, but we shine because they hate us, floss because they degrade us. I'm trying to buy back my 40 acres before that paper. Look how low. Woo! This is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, so I looked. Well, if you're still hanging out at this point, once again, I appreciate it. This stream of consciousness flow is not algorithmically optimized, but what I'm hoping for is my lapses and my truth and my honesty and my lived experience is able to reflect reality in ways that I'm too old and I'm too antiquated to even understand or value. The ways that this deals with natural speech rather than scripted language. This deals with unfiltered ideas rather than research papers and presentations of ideas which are completely confined by previous conceptions. This is the story all about how my life... All right. And I feel like some of the pauses are actually really good ways to reflect and allow people like time to think, and sit inside of things as they're being said. Because that was the thing I said in the other video about reading. I was like saying I can't see any of the benefits of reading. And then I was like, wait a second. I guess one of the benefits is the way that it allows your mind to visualize. So it's using that kind of visual muscle. It's like ChatGPT image generation. It's like prompting visuals from your brain, which can be really cool. It can bring you to like a dreamlike state. But then I made the point of like, well, just close your eyes. While I'm talking right now, just close your eyes. But I don't know if the answer. Well, obviously, books aren't completely meaningless, and obviously they are getting kind of old and outdated. So the answer's, as always, somewhere in the middle. Just like politics. But the power structures that be reaffirm this divisive thinking in order to keep people down and oppressed and yelling at each other instead of yelling at the systems. We shouldn't be yelling at anything, man. I need to empathize more with these rich and powerful people because they're the most fearful. They're the most insecure. I can and will find a way to a better tomorrow. And I can't do that if I'm at odds with the people who control today. Every day, today, I gotta get, I'm scared to say their names, private equity. I got to get them on side, on the good side. I got to get them to realize that it doesn't matter how much money they have, their kids are still inheriting the world they leave behind. Steve Jobs is dead. Walt Disney is dead. Name someone living who you can mention in the same sentence. I like Lady Gaga, but what the does she know about cameras? Well, Kanye, one of the things that she knows about cameras is her overall taste and aesthetic sensibilities provides her the opportunity to give artistic lenses and merit to the branding and production of a company. That was his point. Taste. We defer taste so much. We rely so much on other people to tell us what's right, which is not a good mental framework, because the best mental framework is to respond to your lived reality. And part of my lived reality is all of the ways in which authority and institution was unable to recognize and exemplify or accentuate or assist my pursuit of changing the world. The young people, it's not that they can change the world, we are changing the world. Like, if everyone just sits at home and does nothing, that is changing the world towards a place where your family, your team, your loved ones, your local community, your circle is broken or damaged. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So if one of my friends is dying, then I gotta go give him a bunch of resources to survive. I was trying to tie to that earlier analogy, but that's not the best analogy. When you have a community, when you have a group, you are an impactful and meaningful decider of how that group exists in the world and how they're able to maneuver it. So it's like, I need to empower myself to build better ways of learning and understanding. And in order to do so, I need my community. I need Madani, I need Ona, I need Jack, and I need Peter, and I need brother, and I need my mother, and my actual brother. And all of us together can work on this future. And that's the reason why. Because your people need you. So if you can do it, you must do it. Because if you don't do it, then you won't do it. And if you don't do it, then somebody else got to do it. And that's the mindset too much of us have. It's, oh man, the world stinks. Stop it. Stop stinking. No, bro. You got to clean it up. You got to take all the stuff that stinks and figure out what's valuable. You can't just throw it all away. You know, you got to be like, and this, we just got to clean a little bit. This kind of chipped, but we can fix it. This should have never even been here. This is disgusting. Throw it away. When I'm in these like speeches, when I'm in these moments, I feel like the dots I'm connecting are like just light years beyond what's able to be achieved in like writing a paper or even editing. Like, if I just followed the stuff I like wanted to talk about today, then I wouldn't have made all of these amazing points and tie-ins about how the incentive structure that is enforced on us as children in the education system leads to a disconnection between our brain and reality, and reinforces a connection between our brain and systems of authority and institution in a way that can lead people to not want to do the best thing. They just want to do the thing that gets them the right grade. And in doing so, in following grade in quantifying rather than qualifying, we negate the quality, and then everything becomes shitty, you know? By quantifying instead of qualifying, we foster a situation where quality is overlooked. You can't make a website because you're in second grade. You can't give a speech. You didn't write a paper with 600 words on it. You can't come up with a way to close this video. You're right.